Oh.
Tat Sat. All right, they're charging. As soon as they charge up, we'll switch to the headset. Now, I just came across this. One thing I recommend, other than the Gita, Gita's #1 scripture to read, is Self-Knowledge by Shankaracharya. Really, really one of the very best. That's one book that I always read. Once I went to came to India and started reading Shankaracharya. This is verse 43. When knowledge has destroyed ignorance, this needs explanation, because most people don't understand it. When knowledge has destroyed ignorance, the self will manifest itself. So this is describing self-realization. In the same way as the sun rises, as soon as the dawn of the day has dispelled darkness. So all that needs to be done is darkness needs to be dispelled. And darkness is when we're under the influence of Maya. And every single person is under the influence of Maya. Big and tall, smart, not very smart, meaning high IQ, low IQ. Yes, Sonny?
May I request you to use that speaker thing? Like,
yeah, I'm charging it. I put them in and I realized that I'd lost the charge. I won't do that again. I've never really used them before. I didn't realize that they discharge so quickly.
Guru.
So all that's needed is the removal of ignorance of God. And it doesn't mean that you have to read a lot of books. It has nothing to do with books at all. Nothing. The only reason you read books is because you don't have a guru. If your guru was with you, your guru would be the scripture. Everything the guru would say to you would be scripture. But if you don't have the guru with you all the time, reading the scriptures is good if you understand them. But very few people understand the scriptures. How many people understand the Bible, for instance? How many people understand the Gita? There's scholars on the Gita that don't understand the Gita at all. There's many scholars on the Bible that don't understand the Bible at all. They might understand a little bit of what Jesus himself is saying, but the rest of it, they have a misunderstanding of it. The Gita, there's a misunderstanding of it. And that goes through all of the scriptures. So when knowledge has destroyed ignorance, and only knowledge can destroy ignorance. Knowledge is being confronted with that which is real. So I see what is real. That's knowledge. But how many have seen what is real? How easy is it to see what is real? It's very hard because we're so immersed in Maya, which is ignorance. And it doesn't matter how smart we think we are spiritually. We're in ignorance. We're in Maya, unless we have our eye of knowledge opened. And once your eye of knowledge is open, you see everything clearly. Not because you study it, but because you're living it. You can see. You can see through all that is not true, and you can see what is true. So it's as easy as when the sun comes up, then the darkness is gone. And guru literally means the remover of ignorance. It's the same thing. So the guru is the light. Maya also makes us think that we don't need a guru. We can do it ourselves. That's called ignorance, or I would say that's called egoic stupidity. A person really thinks that they can do it themselves. You really think that's possible?
No.
No. You have absolutely no idea how to go about it. And even if you did, you wouldn't be able to do it. Because everywhere you look, everything you see is misunderstood. You take the unreal to be real. I mean, you literally think that the unreal is real. And nothing can change your mind about that. Except for when the ignorance is lifted. Only then you can be told so many things about somebody day after day after day, and then finally you get to meet that person, and you know that person. You can touch that person. You can watch their lips move when they're talking. You can talk to them. That person will answer you back. In the scriptures, though, you can read the scriptures, but you can't have a conversation with Krishna. A lot of people say that they can, but it's in their imagination. Krishna is not interested in talking to us. It's such a poor form of communication, talking to us. Why use such a poor form of communication? Krishna can communicate with us, but you would have to be awake in order to hear it, and you have to be awake to understand it. So to think that you can do it yourself is a really great day when you realize that you need help. And that goes back to what I've said many times: is you have to know what it is that you want. You have many desires, so you know what your desires are. The biggest problem is most people don't know what to do with their life. What kind of work should they do? What should their field of work be? They have difficulty knowing what it is that they should do. And so there's a lot of counselors, a lot of people, even astrologers that can help you find what work is most suitable for you, what you would be the happiest at. Because we have being individuals, we have certain things that we're better at than other things. But a general rule to know what to do for your life, as far as a career or as far as a way of life is, it's really, really good if you know. Just life in general. I'm not speaking of realization. So get that taken care of. Find out what it is that you want in life. Fortunately, I know I've never had that problem. I've always known what I wanted. And I'm not referring to God. I'm referring to what I wanted out of life, what I wanted to do, or what I wanted to obtain, or what I wanted to have. I've always clearly knowing what that is, what my desire is. So we're here on earth to fulfill our desires. If they're not fulfilled, you're going to have to come back again and give it another shot. On that set, get closer to it until you obtain it. Because obviously the desire that you have is a worldly desire, so you have to come back into the world to fulfill it. So that takes care of yourself as a human being for a period of time. 30 years, 50, 60, 80, 100, whatever it is. But more important than that is what do you want that will satisfy you? I always wanted to own my own business, for example. So at a rather young age, I was 26 when I opened up my first business, which is pretty young to open up your own business by yourself. So whenever I've identified what it is that I wanted to do, I've always done it. I don't listen to anybody who says that I can't do it. I do it. So every worldly desire that I've ever had, I've fulfilled it by doing it. So that's the problem if that's all you want. Because once you fulfill one desire, it creates more desires at the same time. But if you're practicing spiritual discipline, if you're practicing tapas, if you daily, then not only is it okay, but it's the best way to have realization. It's the best way to have enlightenment, because you're destroying your worldly karma by fulfilling your desires. If you're practicing spiritual discipline at the same time, you're not continuing to add more desires. So you're destroying karma. You're not adding karma that pertains to desires. You're not adding any more of that. So it's a faster path to realization. That's just the rudimentaries to realization. You can do that on your own if you're exceptional. You can practice spiritual disciplines. You can read Shankaracharya, and you can start a spiritual practice just from that. From the Gita, you can start a spiritual practice from that. Self-reflection, you can identify your desires, your real core, heartfelt desires. You can do that. And you can go about practicing both. If you go about fulfilling your desires only and not do any spiritual discipline, then that's ruinous. You're just going to continue to be born, live a life of frustration, occasional happiness, occasional unhappiness, and then you're going to die. If you practice spiritual discipline while at the same time fulfilling your worldly desires, you're not creating more karma. If you fulfill even a large percentage of your desires, you won't necessarily have to come back to earth to fulfill the rest of them, because you'll have strong enough of a spiritual connection that you can fulfill the desires astrally, meaning you can do it mentally. On very rare occasions, somebody might cross paths with a true guru, a Satguru, not somebody who's named Satguru, but a guru who's established in reality. And if that guru sees potential in you, he might take you as a disciple. He might not, but he might. If he sees that you're living life on the right track, meaning that you're making an effort through your own spiritual disciplines. I had a spiritual practice that I just formed from what Krishna laid out in the Bhagavad Gita. So I was already meditating before I ever met a Mahatma. So it made that connection when I did meet a Mahatma and a perfect master, and they agreed to give me initiation. I was already established in meditating every day. So it made everything, in other words, the ground is already rich, the soil is rich, the soil is fertile, I mean, it has all the right chemical balance. It's free of pests, it's free of bugs, and it's in an area where there's plenty of sunshine. And then the perfect master, the Mahatma, plants a seed, and then the seed starts growing right away. If the ground is hard, if there's no sun, if there's no water, then the perfect master, Mahatma, guru, finds it difficult to plant the seed. They might have to, with a lot of effort, dig a place in the soil to plant the seed. And the reason it's hard and difficult is because of our ego. That's what makes it difficult. And then they tell you water it, give it water, give it sunshine, keep it free of pests, keep vigilance to keep it free of pests, and then it'll start to grow. But most people in that situation, they're not vigilant. They don't water regularly. They might just water the poor little plant once a week instead of every other day, and they don't cut back some big branches so that more sun can come in. They neglect that. And then all sorts of pests come in, little caterpillars and grasshoppers come in, and if a little leaf, if a little sprout comes on, the grasshopper eats the sprout, and there's just not much chance there, because the disciple, even though being accepted and being given initiation, doesn't practice. Yes, son, you had another question?
I was thinking, what is it that the physical world gives to fulfill desire? Like in mental or astral, or even when we sleep in the dream, I can do everything in the physical world. So exactly what is the desire for which we are pulled back to earth? Like what is it the earth is giving which the astral world can't give?
There's nothing, what you have here on this organic earth, you don't have in the astral world. So the formation of the astral world isn't physical. So we develop desires for the organic experience of the earth. Everything comes from the earth, and it's a gross physical experience, and we have a desire for that. And you won't find that in the astral world. It doesn't exist. So we desire something that doesn't exist in the spiritual world. Only exists on the earth. So you have to go to the earth to engage in that desire, to have a connection to the desire. It's only on earth and nowhere else. It might be on another planet that's similar to Earth. It's all made out of organic compounds. But your astral desires are more of a mental. You know, we all have desires that are mental in nature, and we all have desires that are physical in nature. Your mental desires are your astral desires. Your emotional desires are your astral desires. You might have some strong emotions for your physical desires, and that's the commingling of your astral with the physical, meaning you become emotional over obtaining something, somebody, or even some object. You become emotional about it. So there's all sorts of desires. But removing a desire yourself, you'll say, well, you just don't have the self-discipline to not do that. Just don't do it. Well, I try not to, but then I find myself doing it anyways. Self-discipline is the worst way to go about it. Sure, you can have self-discipline, meaning you can really have strong willpower, but it doesn't really eliminate the desire. You're just not indulging in the desire, but the desire is still there. You're not satisfying the desire. You're just simply refusing to indulge in it, but the desire stays. The only way to remove the desire is to remove it through action. In other words, fulfill the desire in the way that you want it, because a physical desire requires your physical body. It pertains to the physical. In any type of trying to remove a physical desire mentally isn't thorough, because you need the physical reaction, the physical interaction with your objects of desire to really satisfy it. The problem is you satisfy the desire and it's fleeting, it's momentary, and the desire comes back. And if you continue to repeat it, the desire comes back stronger and stronger and stronger. So there's no way to avoid this karma. Once you set this emotion, there's no saying, well, I won't do it. You're still going to have the desire to do it, even though you have been, let's say you've been very successful, because you are extremely mentally strong to resist doing something. The desire is still there. So under favorable circumstances, that desire can come back strong again. So a person tries to distance themselves. Well, for example,
Wow. Oh, Sibsa.
I bought a pretty good quantity of ice cream because it was on sale. I think it was like 2 for the price of 1, something like that. And I have a freezer. So I bought a fairly large quantity of ice cream. And ice cream has sugar in it. And I tell you not to eat sugar. And normally I don't eat sugar. The only time I have sugar is when I eat ice cream. So I had a little bit of ice cream at a particular time of the day. And then the following day, at the same time, I had the desire for ice cream again at that same time of the day. So I thought, well, there's so much of it. I'll just have another little bit of ice cream. And then the next day again. And I'm not particularly motivated to lose weight. I've already lost a lot of weight, so it's not a factor of calories. And I was enjoying the ice cream, and I eat very little, so I wasn't gaining any weight. But then after 2 weeks of eating ice cream every day, I thought, well, this really it can't be good for your health to eat ice cream every single day. You need to stop it. Well, I can do that whenever I want to. If I want to stop something, I can just simply stop it. But the ice cream is still here. It's still in the freezer. So if there was no ice cream in the freezer, there would be very little chance of me eating more ice cream. But because it is in the freezer and it's easily accessible, I can still go back and have another spoonful, and the whole cycle can start all over. So that's what it's like to have karma. That's what it's like to have desires. You can be successful in, okay, I give up the desire. But there's a possibility that as long as that ice cream is there, as long as that item is there that you desire, there's a possibility that you can start up again. So ice cream, we're referring to ice cream as karma. As long as the karma is there, if it hasn't been completely eradicated, there's always a chance that that karma can come back. It's very, very stubborn. Ramakrishna said that if you're cutting onions and you have onions all over your hands, and you wash your hands, you can still smell the onions. You can wash them again, and it's real hard to get rid of that odor of onions. So karma is very hard to get rid of. But karma is supplied. Its presence. It's supplied as power through ignorance. If there's no ignorance, karma cannot survive. So it would make more sense to remove ignorance than it would be to try hard to remove all karma through action. There is prarabdha karma, so even if we were successful in removing karma, there's still prarabdha karma that's continuing to go. It's like running out of gas in your car, but there's still enough fumes and there's enough momentum, your car is still rolling. So when Shankaracharya says, when knowledge has destroyed ignorance, so ignorance is referring to Maya, it's referring to karma. The self will manifest itself in the same way as the sun rises, as soon as the dawn of the day has dispelled darkness. We've heard this many times. We've read this many times. We've heard other versions of this many times. But how many of us have met somebody to where this is true, to where this has happened to them? How many of us have kept the company of such a person? Without keeping the company of such a person, it's just a nice thing to read. It isn't manifested in front of us. We've never seen an example of it. None of us have met Paramahansa Yogananda. He left this earth before we were born. None of us have met him. Our connection to Yogananda is through a reading of the books associated with him. And books can be a big influence, but a book about something and the living presence of something are entirely different. If I could read about tigers, and I've always loved reading about wildlife, all sorts of wildlife. But when I would meet an animal in person, it's entirely different than what you read in the book. Even the best artists can portray a tiger, but seeing a tiger 3D, breathing, the hot breath coming out, and the sounds they make, and the smell. You forget about the smell of the tiger, and the way that it moves, and the way that it looks at you, and it sees you looking at you. It sees you looking at him. None of that is portrayed in a book. Now, a romantic type of book could portray these emotions, these feelings, but that's only because of your previous experience. If you didn't have a previous experience of what's written in the book, there wouldn't be any emotion involved. So you study about a tiger, but you don't know a tiger. So this is what it's like reading about Paramahansa Yogananda. And we can be inspired because the life of a saint is inspiring, but it's nothing like being in their presence. Being in their presence is being in the presence of that tiger. It's an entirely different thing. Why isn't this spoken about? Why isn't this discussed? It's a common fact It isn't my opinion. All of you know that this is true, but it's forbidden to talk about it. Why? Well, it's because people are afraid to talk about it. Well, we don't. Paramahansa Yogananda is come and gone. We can't talk to him. We can't go see him. He's gone. He's not there in Sanitas anymore. So people don't want to think about that. They want to think, well, his living presence is in the book. We'll do some prayer and some affirmation along with it, and we'll pray for his presence. We'll invoke his presence. That is true. You can do that, but you would have to be at a very high level of devotion, and you would have to be very pure at heart to do that. If you had that high level of devotion, if you were pure at heart, if your mind wasn't restless, then that's definitely a possibility. I've experienced it. I know others that have experienced that. But it's tangible, but it's more of a intuitive experience. But to have a tangible flesh and blood, soul, spirit living in that flesh and blood body, looking at you, you're looking at them, you're interacting with Yogananda. Very, very different. And so that's a rare thing. Yogananda was born. It took him a long spiritual journey to meet Sri Yukteswar, and then he started his teaching. So does that mean that everything is bad news for us because Yogananda is gone? No. There are other Mahatmas. There are other masters. As hard as Yogananda, when he was alive, he was hard to identify. Nobody said that, except for just a few. Nobody knew that he was a perfect master. Nobody knew that he was a Mahatma. Nobody knew he was a saint. It's all after the fact. At the time, only a few knew. Those that spent some time with him. He made his presence known by traveling all through the country and giving lectures on stage where thousands of people would come to hear him. But those same thousands of people were also going to the same stage and listening to other people too. Talk about scientists talking about their field of science.
Guruji,
Yes.
I just want to ask if there is somebody who followed him or any guru that like if we follow and they physically leave their form, then how is the connection maintained?
Oh, and after, if someone's a disciple of Yogananda and Yogananda dies, is that what you're saying?
Yes, yes.
Well, because there's already the connection there, and you can't ever sever that connection. So it would
But
be
would a disciple like understand that like once he left his body, would the disciples that are connected, would they be able to understand that, or not everyone is reached that stage?
no, the disciple would be, it would be very easy for them because every moment they spent with Yogananda, they would realize that he's not just only the physical body. Yes, he is the physical body, but not only the physical body. Whereas you meet somebody else, uh, even if they're expert at something, you see them only as the physical body. You don't see them as Atma. You don't see them as soul. Um, you don't see anybody as soul. You don't even see yourself as soul. But a disciple who has followed some of Yogananda's practice, they start uh, uh, very quickly to see that Yogananda is not only the physical body, he's also soul. He's also Atma. And um, so then they have that experience. So their connection is permanent. It's never as long as the disciple continues to choose to have Yogananda as their guru, continues to have reverence for that, then that connection would be forever. Yeah, so that's not a problem. The problem is for those who never met Yogananda. They're living based on concept. They receive concepts of Yogananda by what they read. They receive concepts in Yogananda by what others have read and their ideas. Some like Sunny, who knew Swami Kriyananda in person, he listened to firsthand accounts of Yogananda from Swami Kriyananda. So he was able to get a better concept of what Yogananda was like. But still, Sunny never met Yogananda. So that type of connection was never there. So these are, when I say to be honest, you have to be honest about these things. If you're approaching truth, you have to be truthful. You can't live in an imaginary world. I never pretended to know Ramakrishna, for example. Even though I've studied Ramakrishna's life over and over and over and over, and I know it really well from what I've read, and also from what his disciples said. I've never met him. I never spent time with him. That's not going to happen unless I have the soul knowledge and knowing myself as Atma. Then I could have the desire to want to meet Ramakrishna in person, and we could have a spiritual communion. He could commune with me in spirit because he is spirit. But I would have to realize myself as spirit before that could possibly happen. So then that would be possible. We can do that. Now, some people say, "Well, I'm a Christian. I think of Jesus, and I feel His presence sometimes." And that isn't necessarily true. There is some truth to that. It would be like being in a room and somebody comes in the room, but you never see them, but you can just feel their presence in the room. It would be like that. It isn't a strong experience because they're not actually there with you and talking with you and you're asking them questions. You just feel a presence in the room, but you never see that presence, but you feel it. Like all of you, if you're in a room and somebody comes in the room and doesn't make any sound at all, no sound whatsoever, you can feel that somebody's in the room with you. So with intense prayer and devotion, some feel the presence of Jesus, for example. And that would be also true of Yogananda. A lot of people sincerely love Yogananda, follow Yogananda, meaning they follow his spiritual practices, and they go to religious services pertaining to Kriya Yoga, and they can feel the presence of Yogananda, similar to us feeling the presence of somebody in the room. And if that person is real, if that person is true themselves, if they have real true devotion, then you could most certainly feel the presence of Yogananda. I have personally, and it was unmistakably the presence of Yogananda. That was made very clear to me. But I wasn't able to have a conversation with him. But I wouldn't say that conversations aren't possible. Yogananda said that he had conversations with Ramakrishna, and Nandamaya Ma would have conversations with masters that weren't in the physical body. Archana and I and Savitar went to Ananda Ma's ashram where she left her body, where she died. And we, quite a few times, it was close to where we lived in Derridin. And we would go up into a room, and her bed is here, and then there's a little room in the same room, and that room, it was kind of in disarray. There was some furniture that was upside down. But they said that that's a room where many divine beings would come to Anandamaya, and where they would commune together, speak together, these sorts of things. Yeah, Sunny, you have a question?
Not a question, Guruji. I think I was just thinking what happens is like I have had these things. I went to some of shrines of Yogananda ji also, and I felt specifically in those places, oh, it feels like I have been here before. And then the mind starts to think that were you with him in a previous life, either with Yogananda ji, and then obviously whether he was there in a previous life as somebody else, and all those stories. So when you start hearing that coupled with uh, you know what is taught in organizations is that this whole group moves on the earth to make things happen. It's like it is a time for a certain thing. So Yogananda ji, along with his whole set of people, is working to bring change in the world in a certain way. And the more my understanding is now that the only change which Yogananda ji would have wanted is that I get self realization or God realization. And it should happen in that lifetime when I meet him. And if not, then all these other things are more mind game. That's what I was thinking.
Well, the problem with this sort of thing is there's a lot of thinking involved. Previous lives, the presence of Yogananda, did we have a relationship in a previous life? And then now I've reincarnated. If you hear people talking about such things, it involves a lot of thinking. Anything that involves a lot of thinking is a barrier between presence and, of a saint such as Yogananda. If you're thinking and imagining and past lives and this and that, it's just all imagination. We can create a lot of things with our imagination. Some people, for example, they say that I was so and so in a previous life. So I know collectively Kriya yogis think of this. They think of maybe in my past life I was this disciple of Yogananda, or I was that disciple of Yogananda. That's all complete agitation of the mind. It's a restless mind. It's not true. And suppose it was true. So what? What difference does that make? You're still who you are right now. How does that change who you are right now? What is your consciousness right now? Yogananda had brothers and sisters. Did they all become sages and saints? Did his elder brother, who was very materialistic, did he become a sage? Lahiri Mahasaya had sons and daughters. Did they all become sages? A couple of them say that they are, but they don't demonstrate it. So association doesn't necessarily. And Yogananda associated with a lot of people. A lot of workmen came on to Encinitas to work on the equipment there and to do repairs. And there was one who came regularly, and saw Yogananda on a regular basis, but he never became interested in meditation or spiritual life. So there should never be too much emphasis on something you're not experiencing yourself. It would only have meaning if it pertained to your desire for spiritual realization. Then only Yogananda would have meaning to you. Yogananda met thousands of people, but he didn't have meaning to the majority of them. He only had meaning to a few of them. To them, he was just another human being, a strange human being, because he lived in America. Many people thought Ramakrishna was mentally ill. That's not a joke. That's truth. Many of them thought that he was mad, that he was mentally insane, and many mocked Yogananda, especially in the newspapers, where he would come into town and give a talk, and then he would usually stay for a whole week. And for those who wanted to be initiated in Kriya Yoga, he would have classes every night for a week, and then they would stay there with him. So the ones who had a spiritual desire that would be kindled by Yogananda's presence, and then he would follow that up with a week of person-to-person instruction. This is how Yogananda gave initiation. And then some disciples back then, when Yogananda was given initiation, he told some disciples, because he couldn't be everywhere all the time, he said, go initiate that person, and or go initiate this person. He never designated a successor to self-realization fellowship ever. So there have been no successors, even though James Lin had the realization for it. But James Lin, even though he became the president of the Self-Realization Fellowship, he never did very much with the organization. So we're viewing everything with our senses, our material senses, which we're mostly aware of, and then also our astral senses, our mental senses that we're occasionally aware of, and we're viewing everything inaccurately. And so if we wanted to advance spiritually without a guru, it would be similar to stumbling around in the dark. We could get hurt, we could trip, we could fall. We might find something good, and we could feel it. We could hold on to it. As long as we held on to it in the darkness, we could have some benefit that way, but it wouldn't progress much from that. So all of that can be progress, but it's not real substantial progress. It's more on a evolutionary progress, and there's different rates of evolutionary progress. So if someone has the opportunity, and most don't, but some have the opportunity to have an enlightened guru, that they're the ones who make very, very rapid progress. Some say, well, you make rapid progress with Kriya Pranayama. And that's taught that progress is faster. I see no evidence of it. In that sense, I've seen people who practice Kriya Pranayama for much longer than you have, for decades and decades and decades and decades. And I've seen no change in them at all. So the technique of Kriya Pranayama, it's a good technique. It enlivens the prana in the Sushumna to a certain extent, but in most cases not very much, because the person lacks the knowing how to do it properly, and they also lack the concentration in doing it properly, because they're not living a good spiritual life. Meaning they're still doing many things in life that are counterproductive to Kriya Yoga practice. And this is also from Shankaracharya, the flame of knowledge that arises by this constant churning of meditation on the wood of the self will completely burn away the fuel of ignorance. So I read this before initiation. And so I would read this constant churning of meditation on the self, on the wood of the self. And I would say, okay, how do I do that? And if you read this, what would you do? How would you do it? How would you do that? Constant churning of meditation on the wood of the self. How do I do that? Most spiritual teachers will give you something to imagine. Imagine the self to be like this. Imagine the self to be like that. Shankaracharya doesn't say anything about imagination. He says meditation on the self, not an idea of the self. He says meditation on the self. Well, a spiritual teacher who has no knowledge of the self, doesn't have self-realization, how would they teach at an advanced level? Om Tat Sat. How would they teach at an advanced level? Well, they couldn't, because they themselves are not don't have the consciousness of the advanced level. Now, they can be very intelligent, so they can teach you many things about many things, but none of that leads to spiritual progress. It's only the revelation of the self and meditation on the self where you start to make substantial progress. The more Kriya Pranayamas you do, doesn't mean that you're evolving quicker or faster. Doesn't mean that your spiritual progress is becoming more. I've always heard it. I've been seeing it lately on YouTube. It'll pop up in my news feed, and it'll say so many Kriyas equal so much time. I think it says something like 1 Kriya equals 1 year, something like that. And I read these things, so you need to do this many Kriyas to evolve 100 years. You need to do this many Kriyas to evolve 1,000 years. If you heard that, wouldn't you think that doing Kriya Pranayamas is what Kriya Yoga is? And that you have to do more and more and more of it? And the more you do, the more advanced you become. If that was the case, then wouldn't you be performing 1,000 Kriya Pranayamas every day at least? Of course you would. You could do 1,000 every day if you saw that would fulfill the goal. But that isn't true. You can do 100 million kriyas and not become liberated, not become enlightened. The kriyas, each kriya, let's say you do 100, each kriya has to be done perfectly. It can't be a partial kriya, or it can't be a kriya that's not completed or is not done properly. Every kriya pranayama has to be perfect to start making progress. what does that mean? Okay, what is a perfect Kriya Pranayama? Perfect Kriya Pranayama is taking the current, taking prana and pulling it up from the Muladhara to the medulla oblongata, the base of the brain, bringing it into the agya, and then bringing it up to the sahasrara, and then back down, and then revolving that. That was one Kriya. This is two Kriyas, three Kriyas, but Kriya Pranayama is done with that energy. It's not done in imagination. I just described the technique to you. And so people, before you start doing the technique, you have to imagine it, just like learning to ride a bicycle. You have to imagine riding the bicycle. So you have to sit on the bicycle, and you have to put your foot on the pedal in the correct position, which is, I guess you would say that the 3 o'clock position. And then you have to feel the tension when you put some tension on, when you press down on the pedal, you can feel the chain get tighter, and you can feel the bike start to go in a little forward motion, but you're still not riding the bicycle. And then you have to understand that, and you can feel it. I can say, okay, I'm feeling the bike go forward, but then I have to do it with sufficient force to where the bicycle starts moving substantially, not fast, but just moving substantially to where the wheels are starting to revolve. And then I have to be able to, once it starts to move at the same time, I have to be able to take my left foot off the ground, which is what's balancing me, which is kind of a leap of faith. If you don't have both feet on the ground, your mind tells you you're going to fall over. And so you do that, and then you're kind of awkwardly starting. If you ever seen a kid ride the bike, they start wobbling like that. This because they're getting a feel for their balance. But then you have to operate the bike. You have to know how to sit on it properly, where your weight is distributed on the bike properly, where your hands are properly, and then you also have to know how to steer the bicycle through the change of the body, going a little to the left, a little to the right, plus the movement of the steering wheel. And then you also have to learn how to stop the bicycle, how to brake. And riding a bicycle is not, it sounds very complex, isn't it? And difficult to do. And it is. I've taught children, but I've also taught adults. One woman, when I had a bike shop in Atlanta, I taught, she was probably in her 70s, and she'd never learned how to ride a bike. And I went to her house, and I taught her how to ride a bike. She learned how the same way a little girl would have learned how the same procedure. So we're taught Kriya Pranayama, but are we doing Kriya Pranayama? So we're initiated into Kriya Yoga, the technique of Kriya Pranayama. So we're given a bicycle, we're taught how to ride the bicycle, but are we riding the bicycle? Are we balancing the bicycle? Are we steering the bicycle? Are we maintaining the bicycle in the proper lane? Are we going forward? Or are we perhaps not balancing the bicycle at all? Are we perhaps not moving the bicycle at all? Are we perhaps just falling over on the bicycle? We might just be doing what we learned initially from the teacher, and thinking that's okay, I'm riding the bicycle. Meaning I'm sitting on it, I feel the tension in the chain, I feel the forward momentum, and I'll do that so many times, and then, okay, I rode the bicycle. And that's what most people do with Kriya Pranayama. they're never actually riding the bicycle. So I would read this in the Upanishads, Shankaracharya. Meditate on the self. So I was young when I read this, so I took things literally. And my idea was I go to a guru, the guru shows me the self, and then I meditate on the self. And nobody other than a guru or a sage would know the self. An enlightened guru, an enlightened sage would know the self. And then they would show me the self, and then they would instruct me, okay, now you've seen the self, now meditate on it. That's what I took this to understand. This is what I understood from reading Shankaracharya and stanza 42. Now, most people wouldn't have understood it that way. In the same way, most people don't understand Kriya Pranayama. Most people don't, even though they've been initiated and they practice, they still don't know. They still don't know Kriya Pranayama. Sunny made a nice post that I read this morning, or night, and Yogananda's first disciple, the doctor, what was his name again? Lewis, Dr. Lewis.
Dr. Lewis.
Yeah, he was a dentist, and spent lots and lots of time with Yogananda, so he had a good understanding. And he was talking among some of the men, disciples, and you know, they were just talking like you talk. And he said that I've practiced some outrageous number, like 500,000 Kriya Pranayamas. He might even have said 1,000,000. I don't remember, but it was some very, very large amount. And he said it, and it sounded like he said it in a little bit of I've really accomplished something. That I don't know anybody else who's accomplished this other than Master. And then the word got back. One of the monks mentioned Yogananda. Dr. Lewis has performed 300,000 Kriyas. It was like he thought Yogananda would be happy about that. And then Yogananda saw Dr. Lewis later on that day, and he said in front of everybody, he said, "Oh, Dr. Lewis, I hear that you performed 500,000 Kriyas." And Dr. Lewis became embarrassed because he didn't want that to get back to Yogananda. And he said, tell me, how do you practice Kriya Pranayama? And Dr. Lewis told him, and he said, and you didn't do it with Khechari Mudra? He said, no, sir. So, well, then you've done it all wrong. Meaning you're back to zero. You have to practice Kriya Pranayama with Khechari Mudra. And so Dr. Lewis was really embarrassed then. But Yogananda just said that to make a point. So suppose we do enough Kriyas to speed up our evolution. We think, because we've done 500,000 Kriyas, but did we do them properly? You really have no way to measure that unless you have a guru. You would have to ask the guru, am I doing it properly? Who else is going to tell you? Unless you have good understanding from the beginning. When you were initiated, you really understood, which is pretty rare, because your understanding really comes from doing. You start to do the Kriya Pranayamas, and then you start to have the understanding. I started doing Kriya Pranayamas before I even knew what it was. I had never been initiated. I was just a boy in my pantry of my mother and father's house, starting to practice meditation as Krishna taught in the Gita, and I started to feel the energy in my spine, and I started revolving that energy up. I would pull it up and revolve it, just as we see the path today, and then it would come down, and it felt really nice, and it's a real nice, pleasurable feeling. And so I found that I could actually control that in meditation. I could do that. All I had to do was start the process, and then the energy itself would lead me to its path. And so I started doing Kriya Pranayama properly before I was and even then I had no idea what it was. I'd never heard about it. It wasn't mentioned in the Gita or anywhere else that I had. But I was experimenting with meditation, so that's something I experienced. So I continued to do it. But of course, that would be very rare, and I didn't know that it was rare at the time because I didn't even know what it was. So to have a guru means a lot for our spiritual progress. Without a guru, our spiritual progress is very, very, very little. And I'm referring to Kriya yogis, and this is why we don't hear of self-realized Kriya yogis. You might sort of hear it from some that are teaching outside of self-realization fellowship or Ananda, some that are trying to make a name for themselves. They would say such a thing, but it isn't true. You can tell by the way they go about saying it that they're trying to establish a name for themselves. Oh, coming to that point, we'll go to since we're on Kriya Pranayama. If you can't feel that energy in your back, and I could say spine, but let's just say the back. You don't necessarily have to think the spine. You can just leave the name, the spine, entirely out. But do know that you'll feel that energy and on your back. And when you think of your back, you always think of the center of your back automatically. So in the center of your back is the spine. The spine is an incredible. Just to think that was formed in the embryo, that all of that complexity was formed out of the egg and the sperm, and it develops the spine and this little creature that develops into a human. It's incredibly remarkable. But you have one. You're a human, and you've made it this far. You haven't been killed yet. So you've already accomplished a lot. So just generally have more awareness of your spine. Not like a chiropractor has awareness of the spine, but just feel that you have a spine. And most of us are thinking about some part of our body. It's usually a part of our body that's stiff or has a hurt. But sometimes different parts of our body give us pleasure too, like a muscle that we use to lift something or comb in our hair. Could be pleasurable. Different things like that. So just try to have more spinal awareness during the day. The real secret to Kriya Pranayama, if you want to develop this connection with the energy in the spine is Khechari Mudra. If you can become accomplished in Khechari Mudra, it's going to be easy to feel the energy in the spine. There's a connection between Khechari Mudra and prana in the spine. So Khechari Mudra really encourages prana to come up the spine to a much larger extent. And this is why Khechari Mudra was taught as the very first technique by Totapuri, to be the most important technique, the first one you can start practicing. Because you can practice it 24 hours a day. Well, not 24 hours a day, but during the day that you're awake, you can practice it. You can always do it. And, anywhere you are. Other people don't necessarily, through observation, they can probably see that you're doing something a little odd with your mouth, but most people are doing something a little odd with their body in some way or another. I never realized, for example, that I talk, that my mouth is crooked when I talk. It comes out. One part goes up and one goes out. Other people notice it, but I never knew. So there's always something like that. So do Khechari Mudra all the time. Practice it. If you become proficient, meaning that if you can bring the tongue all the way up, not all the way up inside, but just make it to that point to where you're inside. If you make it to that point, there's a little hook, a fleshy little piece of flesh that you can hook your tongue on. If you can just make it to that point, that's sufficient. It doesn't have to go any further. The only reason you would practice it going further would be so that you can get to that first point and leave it there comfortably. Then you'll start to feel the prana in the spine very quickly. So Khechari Mudra is extremely important. Why isn't Khechari Mudra important in Kriya Yoga? It would have been. Yogananda taught it to James Lin, he taught it to Kriyananda, he taught it to Dayamata, he taught it to some others. But most people, it was just, in the West, it was such a strange thing, such a weird thing that people they were not very receptive to it. So he decided to just omit it. There was already so much strange about even being vegetarian back then was very strange. There was already so much about Kriya Yoga that was so odd to Americans. Khechari Mudra being the strangest one that he decided to just omit it, other than those that he was close to. Whereas in India, in the lineage of Totapuri, it's taught to every Indian that Totapuri, that Khechari Mudra is the number one technique, and the number one important technique. It should be practiced all the time. So if you can do that, and there's many of you in the group that can easily do Khechari Mudra. There's some of you that can't even come close to doing it. You can make your tongue longer. Some people will never be able to do it. It's just not, physically, it's just not possible. So in that case, you just put your tongue back and up. But you don't want to have any stress while you're meditating. And so that also encourages prana to come up to the Sushumna. But if you can do Khechari Mudra properly, it's almost certain that you're going to start feeling prana in the spine. It has that much of a benefit. It has lots of other benefits too. And then the second way Second most important way is to do, and I've showed you before, I'm just going to remind you to do, yeah, sorry.
I think it was by mistake.
Oh, by mistake? Still trying to charge my ears. See if maybe I got it. On top set. Working? Yeah, it's working. See if I can connect.
Guruji.
Normally they'll connect automatically, but I've never had them discharged before. Well, apparently you have to charge them a long time.
Guruji.
Was that console?
In a while I have to go because I'm picking up Louise at the station.
Louise,
Louise.
you're in America?
No, Louise is in Italy.
Is she really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice. So you're,
Yeah.
you're picking her up in Rome?
No, she's
Yes,
stopping off
Guruji,
in Florence.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear me because I'm on the train.
Yes.
I was in Macon, on the Florence, and then to Rome.
Oh, great. That's wonderful.
Yes, I'm
Really wonderful. Well,
excited to
it's
see
wonderful you're
Consuela.
in Italy. It's wonderful that the two of you can meet. Yeah, Louise is kind of
Yes.
my international ambassador. All the people I'm unable to meet because of my illnesses, Louise goes and she meets everybody. And so to connect with Louise, you're connecting with me. Okay, y'all have a wonderful time.
Thank
Did
you,
you agree?
Guruji.
Thank you.
Okay. On that set. It's nice to hear. So Khechari Mudra is very important. You've probably never been told that. I don't think I've ever told you that. Another way you can definitely start to feel the energy in the spine, which is prana. And Kriya Pranayama cannot be practiced unless you feel the energy in the spine. You can do the preliminary to Kriya Pranayama, but you're not practicing Kriya Pranayama. I'll tell you another story. My school, they taught you how to use, they taught us every musical instrument. So, but you had to be a certain age. You had to be in junior high school. So he um, came home after school with a flute. They also taught us how to play the flute. And I saw that, and I really wanted to have a flute to play the flute. And so he was showing my mother and father, and he was showing them how you can play the different notes as he was taught in music school. And I started to feel really sad because I didn't have a flute. And so I think it was my father. He got me a paintbrush, and, about the size of a flute, a big thick handle. And he said, "Here, this is your flute, and just pretend that this is your flute." So my brother was playing the real flute, and I was pretending that I was playing the flute, but it was just a paintbrush. this is how most people practice Kriya Pranayama. They're not actually practicing Kriya Pranayama. They're pretending that they are by breathing through the back of the throat with the ah and the e, and visualizing the current. Which I'm not saying that that's a waste of time. It's not a waste of time at all. It has, even if you don't feel the prana and the spine, you're still doing a technique that is visually with the breath. That's also very beneficial. All I'm saying is, when you start to do it, when you're starting to do it with prana awareness, your progress is going to be much faster. Now that's the airplane route that Yogananda is describing. All it means is your progress is going to be sped up substantially. It's going to be much faster. The intensity of your practice will be greatly enhanced because you'll be have the consciousness of prana, so you're working directly with what you need to be working with. You're not imagining you're working with it, you're actually working with it, thereby increasing your spiritual consciousness. So to do this, you'll do Kriya Pranayama as you normally do. Breathe in through the back of your throat. Now it is interesting when Yogananda said to Dr. Lewis, well, you're doing it all wrong, because you have to do Kriya Pranayama with Khechari Mudra. He actually wasn't kidding, because that is how you practice Kriya Pranayama, as you do it while performing Khechari Mudra, because you don't breathe at the back of the throat. In the real Kriya Pranayama, you don't breathe through the mouth, you breathe through the nose. You don't breathe through the mouth. So you don't have the ah and the e, because you're not breathing through the throat, you're breathing through the nose. And the reason you're breathing through the nose is because you're doing Khechari Mudra while you're doing Kriya Pranayama. So Yogananda said the proper way to perform Kriya Pranayama is while also doing Khechari Mudra. And he said that. And he said it as a joke, but he also said it as a real fact, as a truth. Now that's something you don't hear discussed, and you won't hear discussed when you go to Kriya Yoga church services on a Sunday, because you're not allowed to talk about such things. So do your Kriya Pranayama as you normally would and the back of the throat. So when the ah and e is the sound of the air. So breathing in, it makes that sound of it's just the sound of the air at the back of your throat is all it is. It isn't a mystical it's not a mystical mantra at all. It's just the sound of air. And then when you breathe out, so you could breathe out with a ah, but you don't. You breathe out with the e. But you notice when you do that, when you breathe in, it's kind of at the bottom of your throat, and when you go, it's kind of at the top of your throat. So do the Kriya Pranayama, and that way visualizing the base of the spine, the Muladhara, and visualize it as the Sushumna, not the spine, but the Sushumna, which is literal. It is real. You just can't see it with your eyes, and visualize the coming up the Sushumna, and visualize the E going down the back of the Sushumna. So when you breathe in, visualizing it coming up and then coming to the back base of the brain and then coming through and then pausing here. So that's the whole. So what you do to do this in a real super advanced way that will really stimulate the field of the prana and the Sushumna, and you will definitely really feel it if you practice this with even a short period of time, if you practice it this way. But what you do is that when you inhale, you slowly start to contract the anal sphincter. Not all at once, but slowly. So you contract the anal sphincter. In other words, you suck in the anal sphincter slowly, along with the breath. And as you approach here, as you start to approach, start to lower your chin. So when it reaches here, your chin is on your chest, and then your anal sphincter is completely. See that? What that does for me, just doing that, and all the hair stand on end. You can't see it on the screen. And then you pause there. The anal sphincter is sucked all the way in. And you pause here. And then as you let out the air with the E, your hair, as you let out the E, visualize. Now you've forgotten all about the anal sphincter. You release the anal sphincter slowly as you go down. So you start to release the anal sphincter, and you start to raise the chin off of the chest so that the chin reaches parallel when the breath goes all the way down to the Muladhara. And then you're releasing the suction of the anal sphincter slowly as you go down, so that when you get all the way to the bottom, the anal sphincter is completely relaxed. It's empty. It's no longer sucking. So if you do Kriya Pranayama in that way, you will start to feel the prana in the spine, most definitely. Be religious about practicing it this way every day that you practice. Don't rather than practicing Kriya Pranayama the regular way, start practicing it this way to feel to where you're going to start feeling some real tangible energy in your spine. You're going to feel it. Yes?
I don't feel it when I do the Kriya Pranayamas, but when I manage to get really still, then I begin to feel it.
Okay. Now, when you start to feel really still,
Yeah.
and you just feel the spine being energized, you mean?
Yeah, I mean, there's different degrees, but
So you just feel like a vibration throughout the whole spine.
yeah, kind of tingling, electric kind of gentle tingling.
Yeah. Now this is different. This is a different tingling. This is a tingling that is moving. It isn't still. So it's moving up the spine. Just like if I took if you took a pretty substantial spider, and if you could train it to go from the bottom of your spine to the back of your head, and you could train the spider to crawl up in a straight line, you would feel it to that extent. And you would feel that there's something real, there's something moving. It's going to be moving, and it's going to be moving up. Now, coming down, you're not going to feel it. You're only going to feel it when it comes up. You're not going to feel it when it comes down. So you're only feeling it. You only feel the prana when the prana is moving up to here. But letting loose, relax the anal sphincter, bringing your chin up, breathing out with E, you're not going to feel prana in the spine. It's only when it goes on. So if I do. So all throughout this right now, I feel it very strongly, like exploding in the upper brain. And then it just falls down on its own. I don't guide it down. I don't feel any energy coming down. I feel my awareness going down because you have to start the process again to do another pranayama. But now, a beginner, the way that you're taught to visualize going up and going down. You're taught just like you're taught to ride a bicycle before you actually start to ride a bicycle. So once you start to feel this prana in the spine, this energy, you're kind of the you can say you're awakening the serpent at the bottom of the spine. You're awakening it, and it takes its own path. You don't have to visualize going up the spine and down the spine. It does it on its own. That's why they call it the coiled serpent, because it also feels like a snake. If you've ever spent time around snakes and handling snakes, the way that they move, just kind of a zigzag pattern. You could also feel the spine just kind of gently, not an exaggerated pattern, but just with a movement going up. But sometimes it's like a little hop, all sorts of movement that you feel in nature. You might feel the prana move in all sorts of ways, but it's definitely a movement. But it's not necessarily one smooth movement, but it could be. But it could be a different types of movement. But it's definitely felt as movement, not stillness. So what you're feeling is you're feeling the vibration of Om in your spine, because you can definitely feel the vibration of Om when you're doing Hangsa mantra. So you feel the vibration of Om, and it's can be felt at any time. So maybe when you're doing Kriya Pranayama, maybe because you're thinking about the spine, maybe that's why you're feeling in the stillness. Or you're saying you feel this energy when you're not doing Kriya Pranayama, or it's when you're doing Kriya Pranayama?
After a while, after I've stopped doing anything at all, I begin to feel, I can feel it. Whereas before there was nothing, then there is.
Well, Om and Prana are closely related. I mean, wherever one goes, the other one goes. So what you're feeling is Om. Because Om will be felt as a tangible vibration.
Guruji, I have the same thing. After Kriya Pranayama, I would hear the vibration, but not in the spine. And so it is Om different from, and the feeling specifically of prana is different from that vibration.
Well, they're closely related, but they are different from pranayama. And pranayama, you'll definitely feel the prana going up the Sushumna. So you'll feel that creeping sensation or the electric sensation, or some that movement, sometimes like a frog, sometimes like a snake, sometimes like a lizard or a spider, um, making its movement up the spine. That's called the Kundalini energy. Kundalini energy is another name for prana. And then Om is there's no movement to Om other than the vibration. It stays in one place. It doesn't necessarily stay here. It can also be felt in the chest. So it can be felt here, through here. But it might be more prominent here, or it might be more prominent in the chest. I feel it like right around here is where I feel it. Is where I feel Om. And it's a vibration that you feel, and it's very comforting. That's the Holy Ghost that Jesus spoke of, and he spoke of it as the comforter, and it is comforting. It's like if you're a child and you're upset, and your mother gives you a hug and just kind of rubs your back to comfort you, to get you to calm down. It's similar to that. Or if you have a baby that is tired but can't fall asleep, and so the first thing you do is you pick up the baby and you do some motion with the baby. I mean, you hold the baby and you rock it like this, or sometimes you do different motions. My first child, Rama, was a real fussy baby. And I found if I took him in the car and put him in the baby seat and drove the car, then he would fall asleep. Because there's vibration coming up, transmitted from the tires of the car into the car. That would comfort him, and that he would go to sleep. And of course, in the womb, when the baby's in the womb, the baby's conscious, and the baby's feeling what the mother's feeling, and it's feeling the energy of the mother's body. It's feeling the vibration of the mother's body. And so when it comes into the world, it's looking. It associates that with comfort. So Om is in one place. It isn't going up and down the spine. Well, it isn't going up the spine, and that's prana that you're moving up the spine.
Guruji,
Mhm.
if you feel that feeling of Om, should we leave the technique? Is that what we are after?
If you feel Om, what technique?
Should we leave the Kriya Pranayama if you start feeling it here?
Should you leave the Kriya Pranayama?
If we feel the Om vibration.
Now, when you feel Kriya Pranayama, continue to do the Kriya Pranayama. Don't stop that. But you want to do it. You want to do it so many revolutions. I recommend 14, and I recommend that you take. There's different ways to count with your fingers. Some people do that. Yogananda taught some how to count with their fingers. I never wanted to do something with my fingers in that matter, but I would take I would take a wrist smiler like this one and see this has crystal beads. So from here I would count 14. So I would start from here, and then with each kriya I would just feel the next bead, and I would feel the next bead. I would feel the next bead like this until I got there, and then I knew that was 14. That way I didn't have to do anything elaborate with my fingers, and I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to be thinking 1, 2, and 3, and 4. I would just feel it with the bead. That you could do it with a mala around your neck, but why have such a big the wrist mala is really the best to use that. And I recommend that everybody do Kriya Pranayama with the wrist mala. That's what I did for years. And it's, to me, it felt like a way to count without any distraction. In other words, without any physical or mental distraction. And then sometimes your guru's presence will stimulate the vibration in the spine. Sometimes when I touch somebody, they'll feel a very tangible electric current. Not always, but on occasion, it's a very strong electric current that's coming from myself to you. It might even alarm you. It's not going to electrocute you. But that's a transfer of Shakti. It's not a big deal. Some call it Shaktipat and make a big deal out of it. The only reason anybody makes a big deal out of that is for selfish reasons. They want recognition or they want money. There would never be any reason to make a big deal out of it. It's something you never think about or you never try to have. It just happens sometimes.
Guruji, I'm recalling now I had once gone to Chennai in South India, and there was this technique which somebody did. It's a healing technique. So they use, and I'm now recalling the feeling of prana. But the theory is that our bodies has meridians, and at some point they use their fingers to touch a certain point, and based on the timing of the earth, like it's a specific meridian. When they touch it, it's the combination of the five elements, so different combinations, and it sends the current and it heals. And I really felt it because I had a back after a plane which uh, and he just touched something in my feet in 2 minutes, and then there was a prana like feeling, and then the backache went fine, like a shoulder pain. Very interesting. And I'm able to now think that that's prana flowing. Uh, I don't know if you have heard about it. This technique.
I've heard about all these things. I've been around much longer than you have. Now, there's all different types of energy in your physical body and especially your astral body. All different types of energy that do different things. And different energy is associated with the different chakras. So knowledge of greed or jealousy is associated with the lower chakra, and it really is. The feeling of love and compassion is associated with the heart chakra, and it really is. So those are just two examples, but there's all sorts of energy for all sorts of things, and there's also negative energy. In India, we believe very much in what in the Caribbean we call voodoo, or the evil eye, or somebody put a curse on me or put a curse on my family. And that's a real strong belief in India, so much so that people seem to experience it a lot because they were taught this since they were children. It's not untrue, but there should just never be an emphasis on it. So there's in Jamaica and places like this, in Mexico and other places, and other cultures, they teach things similar. So it's prevalent throughout all different cultures. So it must be true, and it is true. You can have healing, and you can also have curses. But anything that deals with healing is dealing with karma. It's dealing with illusion, and anything that deals with curses is dealing with karma. It's dealing with illusion. So I've never had any interest in either one of them. Yes, Archana? You wrote
Pranam
something?
Guruji.
Okay.
I just wanted to mention that the healing Sunny was mentioning about, that's Nadi Prana healing. So, just that, and I know it's not important, so not really. This is done by people by checking the nadi and seeing if there's a prana stuck in some points, and then they release that. That's it. That's how it works.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's not important. Just like I'm just saying for me personally, just like if to a roofer, somebody who installs roofs for a living, they know about all different types of roofs that you put on your house, and which ones are suitable for different houses and different climate. And if your roof is in disrepair, they also know how to fix it. And some are better than others. Some are do it intuitively because they've had so much experience. So if you go to a medical doctor, which is widely accepted, why can't you go to a spiritual doctor? I mean, somebody who does spiritual healing. It could be a spiritual healer, not necessarily an Ayurvedic healer or a holistic healer. It could be a spiritual healer. You can do such things. So I'm not against it. It's just that I'm not interested. I live under a roof, but I'm not interested in the roof. And the roof is important because I wouldn't want to have rain fall on me all the time. But I'm just not interested in the roof. So that's just me personally. I'm not interested in that type of healing. And so that healing is primarily, when we think about it, we think about the physical, of course, but there's also mental healing of emotional conditions and that sort of thing. And that, as you know, when I'm in India, I try almost anything. I'm open to anything. So if there was a legitimate healer that could heal in that way, I would try it, just out of curiosity, or maybe even it would help. But it isn't something that I'm interested in myself. But if you're interested in it, and there's nothing wrong with you learning more about it, or even becoming proficient at it, if you wanted to do it as a service to others, or do it as a profession. But of course, it's the ones that are talented that have the most success with that. So a healer that is talented would have the most success. Jesus, for example, could heal anybody of any condition. Yogananda was known to heal people's serious physical conditions. I heard that firsthand. His disciple that I spent time with every week for 8 years, he had a defect in his heart, and he was a young man at the time. He was only 18, and Yogananda heard of it. The two of them were walking together, and Yogananda said to him, how is something or another? And Yogananda had a real strong accent. He didn't quite understand what Yogananda meant. He thought he was talking about his heart. And he said, "Oh no, it's okay. It just hurts. It just hurts occasionally." That wasn't the question Yogananda asked. He misunderstood the question. And then Yogananda stopped and he said, he put his hands on his heart. And then he just kept walking. He didn't say anything about it other than that. And he said he never had a heart problem after that, ever in his whole life. And he lived to be in his early 80s. And then Yogananda was Oliver Black. Yogananda performed many incredible miracles for Oliver Black. He said Oliver was an advanced yogi who lived in the Himalayas in India in a previous life and practiced yoga very seriously, and they had cultivated occult powers. And so, in this particular life, Yogananda interacted with him using occult powers, very elaborate occult powers that would shock us. Yogananda had a real interest in physical healing and other things, and experimented with it. He seemed to be real successful at it, as he was in most anything he was interested in. But it has nothing to do with spiritual progress. I have interest in different things. I've never been interested in that. I was interested in bicycles, for example. This kind of the category of having an interest in bicycles. It's not meaningful spiritually. It's not helpful spiritually. It's just something that you might be interested in and you might practice. But some people find it fascinating. I don't find it interesting or fascinating. Now this, I was going to say it and I just realized I forgot about it. I'm reading these books of Master Mahasaya, who was a very advanced disciple of Ramakrishna. And then in the autobiography of Yogi, it's called The Saint and the Divine Romance, something like that. But Yogananda is referring to his time with this disciple of Ramakrishna. And that chapter is full of miracles that Master Mahasaya did around Yogananda, and Yogananda witnessed many miraculous things. If you read extensively of Master Mahasaya's writings, and he was a prolific writer because he was a teacher of high school students most of his life, and he lived with all of Ramakrishna's direct disciples and many other students. He raised many students, taught many students in school, and so hundreds and hundreds of people spent time with him. But I've never, in everything I've read about him, I've never ever heard a miracle being performed by him, ever. The subject never even came up in any of these books about any miracles associated with Master Mahasaya. And yet in Yogananda's chapter, it's full of miracles. Isn't that kind of odd? This is another thing that you need to understand whenever you read something about somebody, and this includes gurus and masters and also avatars. Understand that the complete truth can't be conveyed in a book. My father was somewhat famous. He was a famous artist, and articles would come out in magazines about him. Articles would come out in newspapers about him. There would be TV shows about him. And my brother and I, we would see this magazine article written about him, and it was so flamboyant and so incredible. And then we would look at my father and we look at this article, and it's like, who are they talking about? my father's not anything like this. Because they sensationalize the article that's written because they're trying to write an interesting article. But every article, every magazine, every TV show about him was like that. It's like that's not him. It was him, but it was almost what they wanted him to be. Of course, the real things, the art part was real, but the other things were overly done. Yogananda being a yogi who was a real yogi, I mean, a yogi that did perform miracles, a yogi that did have Shakti, a yogi that did have occult abilities. All the extensive reading that I've done about Yogananda, not just with SRF, Ananda came much later than wasn't even really formulated before my time. Showed Yogananda as having many different tremendous capabilities when it comes to spiritual powers, because he was interested in them. And Sri Yukteswar told him on many occasions, don't get mixed, don't mess around with this stuff. But Yogananda wanted to, it was a desire of his. So he was involved with it to a certain extent. He would even go on stage and perform miracles on stage to show the crowd. And that's a poor use of miracles. That's not a good thing. And so Sri Yukteswar told him to really lay off the miracles. Don't get too involved in it. But you can imagine if you could perform miracles, you'd be very tempted to, in many different ways. First thing, if you can perform miracles, you would want to show other people that you can do it. There's many miracles I can perform. Invisibility. I can become invisible. I can be in two places at once. Those are just two of the many. But I'm not going to show anybody. That would be terrible. If I showed other people who have experienced it, that I've done these things, but I did it. I didn't do it with conscious intent. It just happened. So around somebody with these abilities, these things will happen around you, but you're not trying to do them deliberately. You're not bringing attention to yourself. Like, oh, this happened because something I did. That has many dangers. So an impure person with an impure heart and unfulfilled desires, if you could also perform miracles, just think what a bad person that person would become. If they had some evil tendencies and they also had miraculous powers, that's a bad combination. And most people are not pure at heart. I wasn't pure at heart. So I did use some of those powers for selfish reasons to influence people's minds so that they would do what I wanted them to do. That's a bad use of those powers. But when your heart becomes purified, you have no desire because you see it as such a frivolous thing. And there's miracles happening all around us all the time. And just the fact that we're on this planet and we're spinning, how fast are we moving? I forget, but it's very fast. And we're spinning around and we're being held to the earth by gravity and all these. That's just one big thing, but miracles are being performed around us all the time. Those are the ones we should pay attention to because that leads to humility. You're not showing other people that it has any connection to you personally. For example, I might say, look at that beautiful flower. A flower is a miracle. So we would share it in that way. But to say, well, I feel that you have a heart problem. Let me heal your heart problem. A guru might do that for a disciple, but he told me that Yogananda never spoke of it and never said that he did it. He just he told him he was having heart problems. Yogananda put his hand on his heart, didn't say anything. And then they just went about their walk. Nothing was said afterwards, but the heart problem was gone and never came back. And that is how Yogananda performed most miracles and most healings. Some of his real elaborate healings required a lot of preparation and a lot of time. Okay, that's it for today. And tomorrow is Babaji Day, commonly known in the United States as Father's Day. So we'll have a Babaji's Day satsang tomorrow. Okay.
Thank you, Guruji.
Let's Louise and Consuelo.
Thank you, Gurudev.
It's really wonderful.
Thank you, Gurudev.
Consuelo, take pictures. Louise always forgets to take very many pictures, so
I'll take some.
she'll take one or two.
I'll take some pictures.
Okay. That's it.
Well, that's it.